Now the question is, what about such entities as jinns and devils and the like that appears often in religious scriptures? And for instance, in Mark 6:13, Jesus cast out many devils. The same Mark 17:18, Jesus rebuked the devil and it departed, and the child was cured. And Mark 7:23, or the other two are Matthew 7:29, and the devil is gone out of their daughter, and so forth. And then, of course, later on, you get such passages of Jesus exorcising a particular individual, and then 7 devils left an individual, and they were sent into a herd of swine. So that these types of passages, and these types of entities that many people think in terms of it being dark brotherhood as well. And the Bible uses the term devils, and that then concerns such things as imps. These elementals are mischievous nature spirits. They're elementary lives on the astral plane or on the etheric domain. They're not devils, they're not projections of the dark brotherhood. They're basically just small deva or devic forms or deva forms that habituate where human beings are. And it's like children having fun. They can enter into a human vehicle through this chakra opened or sort of misalignment, and they're just enjoying themselves playing these little games. They have no idea what's really happening in the consciousness of the human, because they have no consciousness of that. It's just the elementals, that's what it's called, or elemental life, or elemental nature spirits. There are some more extreme forms of these entities that are quite mischievous, and sometimes they're called mischievous spirits, of same nature, just a little bit more advanced. They enter into that particular vehicle because the door is open, because of the psychic problems of that individual. That can cause, as I said, insanity, because they can play tricks in the mind of the individual, but they hardly know what they're doing. For them, it's just a game. But for the human unit, of course, it can drive them insane or batty or anything of this particular nature, or cause sickness. In one case in the Bible there, when Jesus cast out the devils, for instance, Mary Magdalene, then she became a follower of his, or he cast out a devil out of the eyes and the person could see. And so sometimes these nature spirits, these devas is what they really are, but elemental devic lives, are encapsulated in a particular organ and will stay there because of that function of the organ or the energization, and it cause physiological problems. And so it's psychosomatic problems, physiological problems. And our lunatic asylums are probably lots of these types of cases where they treat these people with drugs. And what you really need to do is get rid of the imp. There's another term for them, the elemental life, to exorcise them out and to close the door, to close the opening, that small chakra, to close that, or to align the nadi system so it's now totally integrated into human form, and then will stop any entity from coming in anymore. And the problem is solved. These types of beings that are susceptible to the elementary lives entering are often psychics, or people that have destroyed their psychic constitutions through wrong magical practices, wrong yogic practices in a past life. And my talk I gave on YouTube called A Warning on Chakras and Energies, this is one of the dangers that is possible. There's simply a chakra is prematurely opened. The individual that is doing the meditation or the yogic sort of precept practices has no real understanding what they're dealing with or what they're doing in the psychic realms. And then it allows entities to come in, which the individual doing that yogic practice, the sadhana or whatever, has no control over. And that entity then likes that body or that position or that game and stays there. So sometimes the karma of that is in a future life to have that door still awakened, and then they're born, and it can produce, idiocy or insanity or any of those things, because it is the result of the premature tampering with psychic forces or with kundalini when they're not ready for the awakening of those energies, the chakras, not prepared for the awakening of the minor centers, and the mischievous entity, and there's millions of them on, on the inner realms. Even normal human units, human beings, there are a lot of people that have died. When they've died, they want to go back into a body. And there's a lot of such entities that are looking for a mechanism of entering another human body. And when the door is open, the psychic door is open, they'll come in. And then you get split personalities, 2 or 3 or more people that can speak through that individual because they've awakened the chakra prematurely, without understanding, ignorantly. Sometimes psychics have this ability or work with this, or it can drive them, as I said, insane. It's just one of the problems of those that want to awaken powers before they have the occult knowledge, before they have any decent teacher, before they are psychically pure enough, they haven't done all of the exercises they need. They're working upon their samskaras, working upon their emotions, working upon their minds. They just have desire for psychic power, and a technique such as chanting mantras, trying to awaken Kundalini, that opens up doors prematurely. These elementals are equivalent in many ways to our animal kingdom. So if you can think of a cat or a dog or a pig or something like that, that can enter into your body with that level of consciousness, then you get an idea what they are. And that's the reason in the Bible that, as I said, Jesus cast out 7 devils and sent them into a herd of swine, because these devils, these elementals, were at the level of the animal kingdom. So that's it. It's quite a simple thing. The people that have these doors open, they need to shut them, and you don't shut them through drugs per se. You have to shut them through correct meditative practice, or through a healer like Jesus that can help to close the chakra itself. What medicinal drugs do is they dull the consciousness. Through the consciousness being dulled, and through, therefore, the chakras being brought at the lowest particular level possible of vibration, and that in itself closes the door, but it does nothing for the consciousness. It does nothing for the further spiritual advancement of that individual. Then have to deal with the effects of that drug. It is best to work to do the opposite of what they did to awaken the minor chakra. A lot of people also are glamored by their psychic powers, and the psychic powers nearly always means possession, one way or the other, by entities on the inner realms. So they're controlled or incarnated into, sometimes by, it can be a good source, for instance, in the case of Edgar Cayce, or it can be quite a benign entity, or it can be quite a malevolent. entity, or one that masquerades on the inner realms as a member of light, as a liberated being to teach great knowledge or wisdom, but what's normally given as platitudes. There's a lot of people that die with some spiritual knowledge or some knowledge of the Bible that are looking always for these psychics that they can influence with their thoughts, with their wisdom, or whatever they think is real. And then the psychics think that they've tapped a very, very high spiritual source, but it's never the case, or very, very, very rarely the case. Masters of wisdom have got better methods of educating the public than using people with what is really psychic sicknesses, which it is minor awakened chakras that they don't have any control over.
So if someone had one of these imps attached to them, how are they going to, if they don't meet Jesus, how are they going to expel that?
They have to learn the technique of generating light and zapping the imp with light. So it's the imp can't stand. The entity won't be able to stand an environment that's intense light. They can only stand in the environment of low-grade consciousness, of base consciousness. So there's the technique of closing all these doors just through the correct visualization techniques. And then proper knowledge of what's really happening. The astral plane contains lots of entities. There's not just what you might call elementals or elemental life forces that would normally be at the, as I said, the equivalent age of dogs and cats and lesser animals. But there's also lots of entities that have been created by human minds, thought forms, desire forms. There's lots of effects of wrong magical practices. And then we go into the problem of black magic itself. You can think of, for instance, every time somebody creates a reverie, in a reverie, it could be sort of some sort of sexual fantasy about what they want to do. Most of you have had this type of revelry, but it can be about making money, or it can be some real nasty forms as well. Attacking people that you don't like in your mind, making up imagery, movie scripts. Whatever is done of this nature, these are thought forms. These are real things, and they can be directed to people. They exist on the inner realms, and they can incarnate through these open doors. And again, cause havoc within the individual concerned, the psychic or the mediumistic. The mediumistic type, this is harbinger to Atlanteanism. And all of these people, from our esoteric perspective, need to be healed. They need to close those doors and then awaken the higher perceptions through proper mechanism of working upon the emotions, working upon their mind, developing more wisdom, generating light, learning from an enlightened teacher the way to gain enlightenment. And then also zapping away these entities. They have no place anywhere in the human form. They need to be repelled. So monkey-like, that's another way of thinking of these elementals. Mischievous imps, monkeys, a monkey mind type entities. Very little mind, but very playful. There's not much more to talk about this. Like in Mark 16:9, Jesus cast 7 devils out of Mary Magdalene. And so she was one, she was supposed to have been a prostitute. She was one that had these psychic abilities. So he came and cast these entities out of her and then sealed the doors so they couldn't come in again. And she knew the effect of that in her consciousness. And then she followed him. She was one of the women that was very close to him as a consequence. That means that she's a disciple. She had karmic interrelationship with him from a past life, and then that will continue. Okay, that's about as much as I think needs to be said. One can imagine all sorts of entities, and some of them can be quite grotesque, especially if they conjured up by a dark force. Others of them just sort of impish, monkey-like. None of them are really all that pretty per se. And as I said, there's plenty of deceased individuals that are looking to incarnate or invade the mind space of human beings because they want to get in contact with the physical world again. They've left their body, they're confused, and they want to go back in, and they see the doorway and they enter. So a medium, or these people are mediumistic, can have any numbers of these entities coming in and out. And occasionally there's some entity that can use them for nefarious aims as well. It is often to distort spiritual teachings. But this is another higher level of possession. We use this term possession, or being possessed by another entity. When it's this higher level, then it's a dark brotherhood masquerading as a white master of wisdom or enlightened being in order to give information that distorts teachings, therefore waylays a lot of students that would find somebody like Alice Bailey's writings, for instance. Instead, they find this distortion which they think then is the truth because it sounds good. It's always got spiritual platitudes mixed in with it. Okay, well, you got another question?
So, Bodo, the Solomon temple, the prophet Solomon is also used these entities to building up his temple, and his mentioned is also Torah and the Quran. So it's kind of the black magic to use these entities to help his building up temple, or kind of
No, in that particular case, it can be devas. See, it can be members of hierarchy. There's, when you're coming to Solomon, then you're talking about the bringing of the new religion, or the reestablishment of the Torah to the Jewish people, and therefore you've got the building of that whole temple, the structure and the religious rites to go with that, and there you would have devas of a higher caliber, much higher caliber than these elementals. If you want, angelic beings that are talking to him, or masters of wisdom or something of that nature that gives him thought forms, gives him instructions, just the same as all of you are receiving in your meditations. So there's a transmitting medium, but there's also the higher beings that are open to higher spiritual perceptions. There's many levels of this. If you can think of somebody like alcoholic, sitting there drinking alcohol and wiping out their psychic constitution in their brains, but they get their delirium tremens, that they see elephants and whatever. So that's the elementals that they're sort of contacting, and that's incarnating into them because they're opening up the doors to this very low elemental life. But then you get the type of the mediator between, I'll use the term God and human beings. For instance, such as Alice Bailey, who received telepathic instructions from DK, or call a Master of Wisdom, and wrote a vast number of books as a consequence. And the same with Blavatsky. So you get this whole range of possibility. And then you get the concept of avatars in Hinduism and Buddhism. And the avatar just means a descent of God or descent from God. Av means above or beyond. And so what's an avatar is another individual like Jesus was, Christ Jesus. The hope to glory is to get, when it's baptism, the Christ principle incarnated into him in the form of the dove at the baptism. And so then he manifests as a cosmic Christ, those energies. So that's another higher form of transmitting medium, if you want, or the highest form possible, where somebody like him then steps out of his body so that a cosmic entity can use it for its purpose. So you get that whole range. But these types of, when Jesus comes to heal those devils out of these psychically sick people, it's the lowest level of entity that we're talking about, the elementals. Also, what you might call the relatively dull quality of the aura of the individual or of the consciousness of the individual that invites these entities. If somebody has a radiant aura, it's full of light, these entities can't get anywhere near such a being. It's a dullness of consciousness. Yeah, as I said, it's a sickness, it's a psychic sickness. And there are methods of healing. Yeah, okay, entities. I'm glad that none of you have them, but there are plenty out there that do experience these types of mischievous entities. And it's not just that, it's other people that have thoughts. For instance, if you revel in sexual imagery and you keep on keeping your mind at that sort of low level of consciousness, you attract to you entities that of like nature. They'll feed you within the images. They'll hover around your aura. There's a type of, vampirism. Vampires, and we can go into this, vampires and werewolves, so these entities as well. A psychic entity can latch onto a being whose aura is devitalized to drain prana from their vehicle. And you've seen these people whose energies are just drained, devitalized, whose consciousness is very dull and dead, and they could have some entities, psychic entities, latched onto them. It's not necessary incarnating into them, just latched on, draining from them prana, because they have these psychic holes. Later on, as you learn the art of healing, you'll be looking for such entities, again, using light to zap them away. But it's no good just using light yourself. The being that is devitalized, that has entities attached to, they have to generate the light themselves. They actually have to be given little rods of power, lightsabers, so to speak, and to produce a more vibrant, bright consciousness that prevents low psychic entities from going to them. Now, when I'm talking about vampires and vampirization and this, then we can end up in the subject of black magic, we want, or witchcraft. That leads us to another big category of discussion, which is advanced for many people.
So sometimes we observe this entity from our people in jobs in around us. For example, the throat chakra, there are an entity, it's doing something, or some sacral chakra, but that guy doesn't aware there is an entity is affect his throat center. And so we don't do anything because it's also create a karma, because that entity is attached him due to his action. He goes do something bad in his throat, he smokes something, he used goes bad thing.
Yeah, you can. You've got the power. You actually have the power to zap them away, but they'll come back because the person that's got these entities attached to them is not doing the work. They have to do the work. If you walked into a pub, now a lot of people, you know what a pub is, a sort of bar or something like that. Now most people revel being in one of those with all the alcohol and all, but somebody like you, if you walked into it, you'll be attacked. There are all these entities there because of that low level of consciousness and those energies. They'll attack and they'd latch on. That alcoholic type of state of mind, delirium, tremors, and anyway, uh, there's a host of psychic entities, low-level psychic entities associated with human base behavior that latch on or attach to people because of the ways that their minds are. And this comes under the heading of thought forms as well. And it's probably a subject I should talk about later, is thought forms. It's something that not that many people seem to be aware of.
When I did work in the inner realms, years back, I remember doing a lot of this, communicating to people who had passed, what was happening, what the process was. And I remember at some point there was like a grandfather that was sitting quite close to his grandson. And it made me wonder about how children are protected from that, because them wanting to go back into the physical. And, as you were talking about, some people have a hard time letting go, maybe because they have alcoholism or drug addictions. They want to keep experiencing that, whatever it might be. But I wondered about children, if they have some kind of protection, at least up in.
They normally do. The thing with children is the vitality. They have a lot of strong vitality. Their consciousness is not developed. It's quite astral, and that vitality, that very youthful vitality, wards off these entities. Children are more likely to see the devas, the angelic kingdom. They're playmates, the invisible playmates. But if a child is living in an environment, for instance, with an alcoholic father or something like that, or if there's lots of violence, say, between that child's parents, then those entities that are latched to or attracted to that type of violence or that alcoholicism, that the child may see and then produce nightmares and so forth within the child. Everything is case positive, but on the whole, if the child is brought up in a normal environment with loving parents, there shouldn't be any psychic entities, but the devas could be there, the little angels and things that they may see, because they are normally quite clairvoyant. Parents have to learn to work with children's natural clairvoyance rather than cutting it out of their consciousness or out of the itinerary. Of course, they taught fairy tales and things like that, and the child can easily imagine those things. A girl with her dolls and things like that, or a boy with whatever he's playing, and they can easily see and be trained to see the devas, the angelic kingdom. There's lots of imagery associated with that in the children's books as well, for that very reason.